The Westeros capital, King's Landing, differs from that depicted in the parent series Game of Thrones because HBO's House of the Dragon is set in a very different era. On August 21, House of the Dragon made its HBO debut, showcasing King's Landing in all its splendor as the city prepared to welcome King Viserys Targaryens, Paddy Considine, future heir. When the dragon Syrax and its dragon rider, Rhaenyra Targaryen, Millie Alcock, were returning to King's Landing, one of the opening sequences in House of the Dragon Episode 1 showed a dragon's eye perspective of the presumably lavish capital of Westeros. The tragic ending of Queen Aemma's, Sian Brooke, birth scene left Viserys I without a new heir and a wife, and House of the Dragon Episode 1 began establishing the key figures who would vie for the kingdom at the time of the king's death. Daemon, Matt Smith, Viserys' brother and the heir to the Iron Throne, would probably challenge Rhaenyra for the throne given how Episode 1 ended with Viserys ordering his brother to leave King's Landing and proclaiming Rhaenyra as his heir. King's Landing's appearance differences in the prequel compared to Game of Thrones can be mainly ascribed to the different time period House of the Dragon is set. House of the Dragon's King's Landing is much more opulent than Game of Thrones, and its differences can be seen in the throne room, the city's outlook, and even the costumes. While the parent series' King's Landing looked far richer than any other Westeros setting seen in Game of Thrones Season 1, it pales in comparison to House of the Dragon's Westeros capital. King's Landing, as seen in the prequel, looks lavish and wealthier as Viserys' reign as the fifth Targaryen on the Iron Throne comes after his grandfather Jaehaerys' 55-year-long peaceful reign. This makes the period preceding the Targaryen Civil War that will be explored in House of the Dragon, the height of the Targaryen Empire. Westeros history will also play a hand in Game of Thrones' less resplendent King's Landing. As House of the Dragon will show, following Viserys' death, a civil war amongst House Targaryen will start, with Rhaenyra opposing the claim to the throne of Viserys' son from his second marriage. While the civil war will have a considerable impact on the Targaryens' influence, as it will lead to the disappearance of dragons from Westeros. When that war ends, the Targaryen rule will still be put to the test by the Blackfyre rebellions, making the time between the age recounted in House of the Dragon and Game of Thrones' Aerys rule quite unstable. This instability can be seen in Game of Thrones' King's Landing, which is less lavish and has a destroyed dragon pit and a much smaller Iron Throne that doesn't impose as much fear as it does in House of the Dragon. House of the Dragon's King's Landing might also seem different as the filming locations for the prequel differ from Game of Thrones. While locations in Malta first and Dubrovnik, Croatia, later stood in as King's Landing in Game of Thrones, King's Landing's exteriors were filmed in Cáceres and Trujillo, Spain, for House of the Dragon. The perfectly preserved medieval town squares offer a different side to King's Landing under the Targaryen Golden Age, which is a capital bent on reminding who rules and what the Targaryen name stands for. However, considering how the events House of the Dragon is bound to show will diminish the Targaryen influence and possibly devastate King's Landing, a King's Landing more similar to Game of Thrones may soon be seen by viewers.